Hey, everybody. Welcome to That Expert Show, where you help run the show. I'm Anna Canzano. Thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited for this episode. We are talking all about nutrition today. I was thinking about this in terms of kids. It's back to school season. I'm thinking about, okay, do I do hot lunches for the kids this year? Do I pack their lunches? How do I get more nutrition into their daily diets? But I also want to make this an episode talking about nutrition for grown-ups, because obviously our kids are going to follow what we do and how we eat. So I invite you right now, if you have some questions on nutrition, whether it's for kids or for grown-ups, throw them at me right now. We are live on Facebook and Twitter. We will take a look at those and we will ask them of our expert. This is one of those things that, as a mom, I have been hyper-focused on nutrition since the kids were born. I try to sneak it into their diet sometimes. I know that's not necessarily the best way to go about it, but I just really want them to grow up to be healthy kids. And I do happen to come from a lineage of relatively short in stature Chinese and Taiwanese ancestry. So, that's one of the things too, is that I always am pushing protein on them because I want them to grow and grow beyond my lovely, cute mother who's only 4'10" and shrinking. And so it's something that I'm just hyper-focused on, and maybe you are too. Our expert today is with Precision Nutrition, which is the largest private nutrition coaching and education company in the world. She's actually the curriculum designer for the company. She got her PhD from York University and has taught nutrition worldwide, which I think is fascinating. She has authored the book, Why Me Want Eat. Joining me live via Skype from Vancouver, British Columbia is Dr. Krista Scott-Dixon. Krista, thanks so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
It's been really fun talking to you in the lead up to this interview as we talk about nutrition and, how to work it into our kids' diets. Can we just start off with kind of the basic idea of what is nutrition exactly? And, why as a society do we need to be more focused on it today than ever before?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think you've put your finger on the idea that a lot of us are struggling with this concept of what is good nutrition, right? And at Precision Nutrition, we've sort of stepped back and taken what we call a diet agnostic approach, which basically means we step back and say, okay, what are the principles that make good nutrition, that make healthy eating? So rather than it being a specific diet or particular regimen or set of rules, what are the principles that govern good nutrition? So we can think of a diet as basically just a way of eating. Mm-hmm. And what are the ways of eating that we know are generally beneficial for humans? Well, one of them is that we eat foods that are generally recognizable as what they used to be, right? So whole foods, less processed foods, foods that we can say, okay, I think that came from a tree, or I think that came from an animal, or came from the ocean, or whatever. And foods that help us manage the physiological processes that occur inside of us, right? So we grew up in our evolutionary history eating certain foods and certain kinds of foods, all different kinds of foods. I mean, your ancestors were eating things than my ancestors were, but to some degree in our evolutionary history, we're eating the same kinds of foods. Mm-hmm. So good nutrition means eating the kinds of foods that our bodies recognize and know what to do with. And it also means eating the kinds of foods that help us control our food intake. So when we eat a lot of highly processed foods, a lot of us know that we find them hard to stop eating. We feel like, oh my gosh, I can't just eat one. I stuck my hand down, that was the bottom of the bag. I don't know how it happened.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, like me and potato chips, or Cheetos.
Right.
I will go through a bag of Cheetos in nothing, in like a half-hour Netflix session,
That's right. And then your hand is touching the bottom of the bag and you're thinking like, where did that all go? Right? Yeah. But you're still hungry. That's the thing. Right. So good nutrition really helps us control what we call energy balance, which is energy coming in versus energy coming out, which helps us regulate our body weight. And good nutrition helps us eat sanely, comfortably, in a relaxed and calm way. So we give food its proper attention. We're thinking about it enough to make wise choices, but not so much that we're just constantly spinning the brain hamsters in their wheel over and over.
Okay.
So that's really the principles that make good nutrition. And they're kind of a lot broader, I think, than many people would allow, for sure.
So let's talk about kids then, because I know, I'm having that dilemma right now is like, it'll be easier for me to just send my kid and go eat hot lunch at school, which is fine. Like I ate it growing up, and I know a lot of people have different feelings about it. But I think occasionally it would be nice to pack a lunch for my kid to ensure that I know what's going into it, and perhaps be hopeful that she'll actually consume it. What's your advice on kids and making sure that they have the nutrition that their bodies need?
Well, I think you've asked a really big question. And I think the question behind the question is, am I doing the best for my kid? Could I be better? And I think that this is something that as parents, we all worry about. We all worry about, could I be a little bit better? Am I doing the right thing? What's going to happen 10 years, 20 years down the road when my kid grows up? Are they going to be okay? Like, there's lots of feelings embedded in this, right? And so I would say one of the first things to notice is all of the emotions that are wrapped up in this experience of being a parent and wanting to feed your child and wanting to give them the right thing. And then we can roll it back to the logistics and say, what's reasonable for you? What's feasible for you? What are your dietary restrictions that you have or your kid has? Do you follow a particular way of eating? Are there religious restrictions? Does your child have allergies? Practically speaking, what do they have access to? Is their lunch going to be squished into a locker? Is there refrigeration? Do they go to a preschool where you can stick things in the fridge? Like, there's lots and lots of variables to kind of sit down and say, listen, what are the opportunities I have? What are the options? What are the limitations? With our clients, what we do, we don't talk about good and bad foods. We don't give rules. We ask them to make a red, yellow, green light food list. So red light foods are foods that make you sick. You can't eat them in moderation. There's something that it's like a no-go, right?
Okay.
Red means stop, right? You hate them. They're disgusting. You're allergic, whatever.
Okay.
Yellow light foods are like sometimes in some situations.
Okay.
Maybe you can eat a little bit of it, or you like it if it's prepared a certain way, or there's just some kind of condition on the yellow light foods.
Mm-hmm.
The green light foods, anywhere, anytime, I love them, I know how to make them, I'll eat them, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
So you can make this sitting down with your kids, if they're old enough to grasp the choices, and say, okay, what are on the red, yellow, green light lists? And then how can we build something for you out of mostly green light foods, maybe throw a few yellow light foods in there, abandon the red light foods for now.
Right.
Maybe we'll come back to them later.
Yes.
But let's look for a win here. How can we make this a win? And that's where we begin. And, again, if your kids are old enough, you can actually have a really awesome conversation about food choices. What do you like? Why do you like it? Is it a taste? Is it a texture? Is it a shape that you like? And kids can actually start talking about food pretty young. And then if you continue the conversation as they grow, they start to develop preferences and they start to understand how food works and what makes them healthy. So to roll it back to your original question, rather than thinking about, you should do it this way, think of it as an ongoing engineering problem where you're continually prototyping and analyzing and what worked and what didn't work and recognizing that things are going to change. Right? Like my little one, she loved potatoes for the longest time. I mean, who doesn't love potatoes, right?
Yeah.
A few weeks ago, she was like, nope, potatoes are dead to me now. And I'm like,
so true. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so like recognize that with kids, preferences are going to come in and out. They're going to have aversions and preferences and changes. It's going to feel completely random. Today, eggs, tomorrow, no eggs. You don't know. And
oh,
okay.
I've made that mistake. Like my kid will one day love a hard-boiled egg, so I'll go and I'll boil an entire dozen of hard-boiled eggs because I'll get so excited, and then they won't eat them for the next 2 weeks and they go bad, and I have to eat them all. So that's true.
Right. That's right. And that's just normal. Like, accept that a lot of this is normal.
That makes a lot of sense. I want to say hi to Cindy Lee Thurman and Lena and Juliet, who are all watching on Facebook with us right now. Juliet has a question. She says, this is an interesting topic. She's got a 6-year-old who's a picky eater, only eats nuggets, I'm assuming chicken nuggets and mac and cheese. He wanted to try other food, but when he tries, he feels like throwing up. Any advice? I don't know what to pack for him for lunch since he's going to be starting in first grade soon.
Yeah, and I think like this echoes so many parents, right? My kid will only eat fill in the blank. And that's very normal. We know that, for example, genetically, people have different taste preferences. Now, taste preferences are very malleable. They change as we age and grow and try different things. So recognize that there is some social component to taste preferences. But some people are more genetically attuned or intrinsically attuned to certain tastes, textures, types of food. And that really comes into play, especially when they're younger. So you're going to have aversions to foods when you're younger that are much, much stronger than you're going to experience at most times in your life. So don't panic. I think it's really message number one. Don't panic. Keep talking about this. Again, explore. What is it you like about nuggets? Is it the shape? Is it the taste? Is it you like to pick them up with your hands? Is it the sensory qualities of them? A lot of times children are much more attuned to sensory input than adults are because their brains are still growing and getting organized. Mm-hmm. So noises, sounds, textures, the feeling of fabrics or whatever, lights, will be much more intense to them than it is to us. And tastes fall into that bucket as well. So rather than saying, you have to try other things or we have to fix this problem, mm-hmm. keep surfing it, keep rolling with it, and keep discussing it. Like if maybe for this next 6 months, nuggets are where it's at, make it nuggets.
Yeah.
But accepting that over time, if you keep gently pushing at the edge of the bubble, you may find other foods that can be incorporated.
That's interesting because it's like if you force the issue too much, then they'll just be completely, they'll have a complete aversion to trying new things. It's like anything, like with grown-ups even, if you force them to do something, they'll not want to do it even more.
That's right. And, we have to remember that like developmentally, kids are all about exploring, individuating, trying things. Do I like this? Do I not? They like manipulating things, so they like things that they can touch and feel mm-hmm. and put in their mouth or not. So to really understand the brain that you are working with is not the same as an adult brain. Mm-hmm. So in some ways they're the same, as you say. Like, I mean, when you tell an adult to do something, they're not going to want to do it any more than a kid is going to want to do it, right? But for a child, individuation starts to become very, very important as they grow. So as soon as they learn the word no and me and mine, they are individuating, right? Mm. And so to not take it as a personal affront, not get upset and angry about it, but to understand that this is part of an important developmental process. Mm-hmm. Now, we don't necessarily love how it all goes down. I've had great conversations with my little one about like, she'll say, this is my body, and I get to decide what to do with my body. And I'm like, gosh, I'm not really sad about you having that perspective.
That's true.
You are going to have to eat a vegetable, but like A+ for having that point of view, right? So to not treat it as a battle, to not treat it as me versus you, but to say, okay, you know what, we're walking here through this process of you individuating. I'm going to look for ways to negotiate and to game the system and to play and to sneak things in, but I'm not going to get angry that you are being a 5-year-old neurologically.
Yeah, that's really hard because I know there have been varying points as a mom where I just feel like I'm failing as a mom. Like my kid will only eat carbs. All she wants is buttered noodles and crackers and butter. And if she could, she would just eat that all day long. And you kind of like feel bad about yourself as a parent. So maybe, give yourself a little grace in that period. You bring up the vegetables. Jody on Instagram had a question about this. She says, she has a couple questions. She says, how can I get my 3-year-old to try some new things? Will he survive if he refuses to eat any fruit or vegetables? Is he just going to keel over?
Yes, he will. Yes, it's quite remarkable what children can survive, so I wouldn't worry too much. Like one of the tactics that's well known is simply having fruits and vegetables available, simply making them present, simply normalizing them. Mom and dad, or mom and mom, or dad and dad, or whoever's raising the kid should be also eating vegetables and fruits. So I think a lot of parents focus their attention on what is my child doing and less attention on what they're doing. But if we think about the household as a system, right? What happens within the system affects all members in that system. So if fruits and vegetables are a normal part of your daily routine for you and for everyone in the household, eventually it will start to be part of the normal routine for the 3-year-old. Maybe they're not there yet, but you just keep introducing and introducing and introducing. And kids often need to taste things several dozen times before they will accept them as normal. You try different things. Okay, if they don't like this one, what about that one? What about raw? What about cooked? So you really look for options and realize there's a whole toolbox that you can choose from, right? If they don't like this one, they might like that one. Again, it goes back to the red, yellow, green light list. You may find that there are a few fruits and vegetables that will be on your child's green light list once they've tried them. The other thing is take them to the grocery store. Now, I know some parents are like, oh my God, take a 3-year-old to the grocery store? Are you kidding me right now?
Yeah.
But, think if this is something that's really important to you, maybe don't go after work. Don't go on a Friday at 6 p.m. after work. Like you're just asking for trouble, right?
Yeah.
But when everyone is feeling a little bit relaxed, take a little field trip to the grocery store and say, listen, we're going to walk around the produce section. I'm going to teach you the names of things. Which things do you think you like? Let's touch an orange. Let's touch the texture of something. Let's look and explore and just, again, normalize it. Mm-hmm. And then over time, you work up to, okay, we're at the grocery store. You get to pick out one fruit or vegetable that you would like. And now the kid's like, oh, cool, I have a choice, right? We haven't really talked about choice, but choice is a huge thing for kids, right? They want to feel like they have a choice. So as parents, we can use the tactic of illusion of choice.
Yeah.
You can have any vegetable you like for dinner tonight. We have tomatoes, we have carrots, we have whatever. The kid's like, all right, I'm going to have carrots. And then they feel in charge of that choice. So offering the illusion of self-determination is also really helpful. And then, of course, you can do the tried and true parent trick of make a fruit smoothie and hide something in there.
I had a pediatrician once tell me not to hide nutritious foods. He's like, you're just setting yourself up for a lifetime of raising a kid, like a really high maintenance kid, if you're constantly trying to hide the nutrition from them. He also said, don't think about trying to get all 4 food groups into each meal. Give yourself a little grace period there where really you're trying to get all 4 food groups into a 2-week span of time when you're talking about little ones. What do you think about that? I thought that gave me a lot of relief because it took less pressure off of each meal.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like sometimes it's just get the food in the food hole for a kid, right? Like that's your standard.
So true.
Get the food in the food hole and not on the wall and all over them and all over you, right? Like,
yeah.
So I think you're absolutely correct, and this is great advice. And also to go back to the earlier point, remember that what works today, the tactic that you need to use today may not be the tactic that you need to use tomorrow or 6 months from now. So with kids, everything is a moving target, right? So developmentally, they are accelerating so quickly that any tactic that you use right now is not a tactic for life. And like I know there are those moments when you feel like you're being less than an awesome parent, and then you span it out right into the next 50 years, and you think, oh my gosh, is this the moment when I made my kid end up dying alone under a bridge because I didn't feed them carrots today, right?
Yeah.
Like you do project and catastrophize. So I love this advice to sort of take the long game, right? And say, okay, yeah, over a span of 2 weeks, like how did I kind of hit the targets generally rather than specifically? And it's so important to just take the pressure off. Like parenting is freaking hard, and it's a 24/7 job. You never get a break. Unless you farm the kids off to grandma and grandpa's or whatever. But even so, you're still a parent in your heart. So really be kind and compassionate with yourself during this time and understand that things will change. So a decision that you make today or a tactic that you have to take today is not going to determine the forever of your child, especially if you invite your child to participate in the exploration of food, the cooking of food, talking about food. Like one of the things so I have a 7-year-old and we love to watch this TV show, Nailed It, together. Do you know what I'm talking about? The baking show. Oh my gosh. It's a baking show where people attempt to create, like very sort of average amateur bakers try to create super elaborate cakes.
Awesome.
And it's inevitably disastrous, but it's hilarious for a 6 or 7-year-old, right? We just think this is the funniest thing. So we watch this show together and we talk about baking.
Yeah.
And then we go and bake together.
Yeah.
And now it doesn't matter what we make, if it's disastrous or horrible. Like her first meal that she made herself was toast and a margarine sandwich. And I was like, awesome. That's great because you're participating in the creation of food.
Yeah.
So more that we can involve our kids in all of the tasks around food, going to a farm, doing, looking at where apples come from, or, picking strawberries or whatever, choosing the food, shopping for the food, prepping the food, like any of that.
Yeah.
The more that we can do, the more you will broaden your kids' tastes and aptitudes. But it's not going to happen today.
Sure.
And that's okay.
Yeah. That's interesting. Let's get back to kids in just a moment, but I also want to ask some of the questions that grown-ups are submitting. I'm assuming Rena on Instagram is asking for herself. She's wondering whether fasting once every month is good.
Well, it depends how you define good. And I think there's lots, we know from the research, there's lots of benefits to what we call intermittent fasting. And I really stress that word intermittent, which means sometimes, because I think sometimes people, think that if a little bit is good, then a lot is better. And it really doesn't work that way with fasting. So intermittent fasting means occasionally, perhaps you abstain from food. And this is nothing new. I mean, humans have been doing this for millions of years by choice or not by choice because food wasn't available. But we do know from the research that for many health conditions, occasionally going a day without food, maybe every few weeks or once a week or once a month, like Rena asks, is not a bad idea. It seems to improve a lot of indicators of health, seems to lower inflammation, seems to help us manage our blood sugar. And there's also a psychological benefit to it, which is that people learn that being hungry is not an emergency. So often, if you can get yourself into a practice of fasting once a month, you will start to discover, yeah, you know what? I can be very flexible in my eating. I can go a day without food and I'm fine. Like it's just not a big deal. So there are physiological benefits to periodic occasional fasting. But I would actually say the big one that we've seen for most of our clients is psychological. To just be like, oh, yeah, I didn't eat for a day and I didn't die.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, fascinating. Okay, I hope we answered your question, Rena. Let Me See on Instagram has a question about increasing height. It sounds like this is somebody who has people coming into a fitness center who want to know, is there any diet that you can follow that increases height, apparently for teenagers, but maybe for others as well?
Yeah, and I sort of laughed when you talked about your heritage. My heritage is the same. I come from a long line of short people, so I myself am 5 feet tall. So I kind of wish there was a diet that could increase height. I mean, it's a really interesting question, and we do know that generationally people have been getting taller and taller, right? So your ancestors in China and Taiwan and Southeast Asia and that region, have also been getting taller, but we're sort of hundreds of years ago, typically quite small. And part of just basic good nutrition, right? Calories, nutrients, meeting the human body's requirement for nutrition. So, human beings have been getting taller and taller and taller as nutrition has been getting better. That being said, height is determined significantly by our genetics. So there might be a range that you could get to, but you're not going to go past it. So there's no amount of nutrition in the world that's going to make me a basketball player, given my genetics, right? So yeah, you might be able to get a few extra inches of height or a few extra pounds of mass if these are, kids that are looking to gain muscle. But, beyond basic good nutrition, ensuring adequate calories, regular activity, proper sleep, there's no magic diet that's going to increase height beyond your genetic potential.
When you talk about nutrients, though, when it comes to height, is protein more important than the others?
They're all equivalently important, right? Everything has a job to do. Protein is certainly very significant, and it's what most of our body is made out of protein, and it's constantly being turned over. So that means we need an ongoing supply of it. If we stop eating protein, after probably about a week, we're going to start to feel kind of bad, and then after several weeks, we're going to see some serious problems related to protein deficiency. So yes, protein is certainly important. A lot of people don't realize that there's a significant proportion of protein in bone. So protein is very important for bone health, bone density, bone formation and resorption, obviously lean mass, muscle, and then all of our other tissues as well are, again, mostly made out of protein. So yeah, protein, significantly important. Healthy fats too, from a variety of sources, and, carbs for energy to kind of engage in that physical activity.
So for parents that are struggling with kids that, just really are averse to eating meat, and maybe they resort to, having the kid drink those protein shakes. Is that the same thing as taking in protein in other forms, whether it's like dairy or beans or other types of like real solid proteins? Does it matter what form it comes in, I guess is my question.
Yeah, it does and it doesn't. So it doesn't in the sense that if you're just looking to get the amino acids, so the building blocks of protein, you can get those from a variety of sources, right? There's all kinds of foods that contain protein, so you can kind of mix and match as you like. It does matter in the sense, though, that we want to get the optimum amount of nutrients from our food. So we want to seek out foods that have the best bang for your buck, so to speak. So if I'm eating a piece of salmon or a piece of chicken or a piece of, lean red meat or, wild game or something like that, there's other nutrients coming along for the ride there. And I'm not arguing in favor of eating meat necessarily, but choosing a variety of protein sources that give us as many nutrients as possible. So if we just look only at protein, we're missing a lot of the other vitamins, minerals, phytonutrients or plant nutrients, animal nutrients, micronutrients, which are nutrients like in fungi, that come along for the ride when we eat whole foods. So if someone is eating a low protein diet for whatever reason, yeah, sure, we can boost it with protein supplements. And, a lot of people find that protein powder is a convenient, portable, high quality source of protein, fits better in your gym bag than a chicken breast, right? So, so a lot of it is like, we go back to that red, yellow, green light food list, right? What is being consumed? What is your child choosing, or what are you choosing? Where are the gaps? And how can we fill those gaps? Ideally, I suggest people get as wide a range of foods as they possibly can. So I would rather see people eat more and different kinds of foods than restrict foods, just to get that kind of maximum coverage of nutrients. But if there is restriction, for example, your kid has just decided, okay, I'm not eating animal products. Okay, cool. Then we'll figure out another way to get you what you need.
Interesting. Heather has a question. She's on Facebook, and she says her son has autism issues, sensory issues, and oral apraxia. This means he's super sensitive to certain smells, tastes, and textures, more partial to bland foods, foods that that divide in your mouth, like rice, corn, beans, are difficult for him to manipulate with his tongue while chewing, and he doesn't like meat. So she's looking for nutritious and easy grab-and-go lunch items because she's been packing lunches for a long time, and she's fresh out of ideas.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, right? That there are some kids who are going to have underlying like intrinsic preferences or aversions to food. And especially we know with kids on the autism spectrum, there are sensory issues typically that go along with it. So, whether that's taste, texture, that's a beautiful description, right? Things that break up in your mouth, like how it feels in your mouth, like these are all really, really important. Here, rather than prescribing particular things, I would start thinking about, are there ways I could modify foods in order to make them palatable? So if he doesn't like things that break up in his mouth, could I make food in a format that wouldn't do that, right? Could I mush it up? Could I blend it in something? Could I bake it in something? Could I put it into a format that would allow me to include that food, but in a way that was more palatable to the mouthfeel? I mean, this is something chefs have been doing for years, right? Chefs love to play with tastes and textures and putting food in surprising formats that you wouldn't expect. But as much as possible, I mean, this depends on how well he communicates. This is another opportunity for the red, yellow, green light food list. Sit down and say, okay, what's my list of green light foods and maybe some yellow light foods that I could modify in some way, right? If corn pieces are bad, what about cornmeal? What about corn mush? What about corn grits? Like, is there some way I can game the system here? Like I say. And then it's almost like I think about it as a template. I think about like Lego blocks, just picking the Lego blocks out. So it's like, okay, could I take 3 pieces of Lego from the green column and one piece from the yellow column and make a meal out of it. And like you said, not worry about it being a perfect meal. Maybe it's 4 kinds of potatoes or something like that, right? But could I compose a meal using that conceptual template of block, 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 put it together? But this is a great opportunity as well to go and talk to people like chefs or cooks or people who specialize in this, or childhood feeding practices, people whose job it is to be creative. Because I think as a parent, we want to be all things to everyone. Mm-hmm. But if you're struggling to find ideas, there's someone who's thought about this and someone who loves doing it and someone who's really good at it. Mm-hmm. Go and find that person and have them advise you rather than feeling like, oh, it's all on me to come up with ideas. And this is where coaching comes in. I mean, this is the value of coaching, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really love what precision nutrition does. I'm fascinated by the business model and how it turns people that are passionate about nutrition into coaches, licensed coaches themselves. Any last thoughts as we wind up here for adults? I mean, I think that in the course of a day, if you're packing your own lunch or you're going out for lunch with coworkers, what's something that you want people to have in their minds as they're going about their day and trying to eat more nutritiously?
Well, the first thing I would say is, since we're talking about kids, remember that kids learn by watching and by doing, not by telling. Right? Their language centers in their brain are not so evolved yet that they're going to hear all that you're telling them. Yeah. So they are learning by watching you. So if you are interested in improving your kids' choices and kids' behavior, really do think about yours. And the meta issue, though, is I would say step aside from rules, step aside from rigid regimes, step aside from magical thinking and imagining like, oh, if I just do it this way, that's going to be the best way, or that's going to save me, or that's going to fix me. Step back from that and take a sane and sensible kind of big picture perspective. We call it a deep health perspective. The idea that there's all these parts of your life, mental health, physical health, emotional health, the people that are around you. How can I think about thriving in all of these dimensions? So going out to lunch, how can I get connection with the people around me? How can I enjoy this experience of eating? How can I make wise choices that feel good in my body? Mm-hmm. That's the metric by which you should be judging your food choices, rather than, oh, did I adhere to this rule? Did I eat so many grams of this? Step aside from that. Mm-hmm. Get present. Mm-hmm. Notice what you're doing. Check in rather than check out. Hmm. And once you start doing that, a lot of things start to fall into place. You start to notice a lot more. Relationships. What did I eat? How did I feel? Mm-hmm. How did I think? Did I have concentration after I ate it? Did I enjoy the experience of it? So that's kind of hard for people to get their head around when they're used to having rules. So we break this down actually into very specific practices and very specific actions that people can do. So I'm kind of giving you like the umbrella here.
Sure.
But that's really what I would say.
I like that advice because I know, I mentioned to you as a mom, I would go the whole morning and maybe I got some breakfast. Once I got the kids down for a nap, I would maybe have time or give myself the time to like pop open a cup of noodles, let it, cook, so to speak, while I did other things and then down that. And I just over time didn't feel good about those choices. Like that was really high in sodium. I knew it had almost no nutritional value. And I think it was a matter of just paying attention to what my body was telling me. Like, this is not the healthy choice. You need to make better choices than this for yourself to put the oxygen mask on first, so to speak.
Yes, and from a place of compassion and kindness and love too, not from like, oh, you're bad, you ate bad things and you should, no. Forget about that, right? Yeah. Being a parent is hard. Being a person is hard. Being an alive person in 2019 is hard, right? Offer yourself the love and the compassion and the kindness that you would offer your children, right? Yeah. You're trying to guide and support and care for your children. Do the same thing for yourself. So when you find yourself feeling sludgy because you ate something, don't be like, oh, you suck, you're terrible. Be like, oh, you know what? I wish I could have made a better choice. How can I care for myself a little bit better? Exactly. So step away from the self-criticism while you're at it.
That self-talk. Thank you so much, Krista, for your insight and advice. We'll be definitely creating a tip sheet based on the information that you've shared today, and we'll share that with our viewers.
Great. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care. And thank you for joining us for this episode of That Expert Show. I hope you got something out of it. You can connect with us always on social media. I'm on Facebook at Anna Canzano, on Instagram and Twitter at That Expert Show. You can check out previous episodes on thatexpertshow.com and all the supporting materials that go with them. You can also check out our YouTube channel where we post all of our previous episodes. And if life's too busy to watch something, sometimes it's easier. You can take in That Expert Show as a podcast on Apple iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, all those good places as well. So thanks so much. Spread the word. If you got something out of this show, tell a friend about it, because that's really what we're all about. We're trying to make things better in your life, help you live healthier, longer, and happier, and take your input as well in taking in that information and figuring out what you want to know from the experts, because it is That Expert Show where you help run the show.